Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Monday, July 27th, beginning of a big week in earnings, FOMC. So today was a little bit lighter in terms of the events, but I think everybody at this point is kind of waiting for some of those bigger things. The one thing that did come out today was, we've got some news about, the next stimulus package, or possible news, I guess, that is coming out shortly, as well as we had a durable goods report that was stronger than expected. So a lot of moves in commodities this today, basically starting this morning, but it's been like that with commodities over the last couple weeks, and a lot of option activity. I put theme of the day is buy the dip wins again. So pretty interesting. We'll go through some of the moves and some of the bigger movers today. But of course, what I like to do on Mondays too is just kind of tell you a little bit about Tribeca Trade Group in case you're not a member and you're watching this video for the first time. We do a lot of different things in the trading room, of which I do not put on Twitter and so forth. So if you follow me, thank you very much for following me and listening to my videos and following me on Twitter. But really, it's just what I'm showing you on Twitter is, and in these videos, is basically just the tip of the iceberg at what we do at Tribeca Trade Group. Really, the weekend is where I start the homework of what I'm looking to do and the strategy. We send out 2 videos to members. I send out a macro video, sometimes on Saturday, sometimes on Sunday, but last couple of weeks on Saturday. And then I really get into the nitty gritty with sending out the weekend watch lists. And, there I'm looking at relative strength and I'm looking at sector rotation. We talked a lot about that. We spent a lot of time talking about, what happened with the Qs, first close below the 20-day moving average since March, and how a lot of charts were kind of looking the same. But, I always like to kind of look at relative strength as well as, again, where that rotation is. And if you look at how the portfolio that we sent out, or the watch list that I sent out, which is equally weighted, and even though there's a down 10% name in here, the whole portfolio was up close to 2%. So that outperformed the market quite nicely. So that's one of the things that we do. We kind of really go through, and even if you're not going to trade all these names, it kind of gives you a sense of what I'm looking at and where I think that there's, like I said, relative strength, as well as the rotation that could see some new areas. And certainly, there was a number of names on this list, particularly the home builders, which we've talked about for the last couple weeks, and the software names kind of came alive a little bit today. A couple of the names that we always see the dip buyers come in. The C Limited was up close to 6.6%. Again, the material names like SSRM was up another 4%. PDD, which saw some call activity last week and was into some support. Netflix too, I thought was a good opportunity. People kind of, after I don't want to say a bad earnings report, but when the price action comes in after an earnings report, sometimes it takes a little bit of time for people to for the price action to kind of come into support. People forget about it a little bit, and then it rallies. That's generally how it works with a strong name where the expectations were a little bit too high. So that's what we do over the weekend, and then we do, our pre-market session starts every day, right around 9:05 in the morning. There, I kind of go over the days, if there's been any major broker notes, any events of the day, and of course, kind of refine that watch list based on what's moving for that day. We do Q&A, which Mondays and Wednesdays formally at 1 o'clock. Today we did a whole hour of that today, discussing what was going on in the market today and the moves. And then on Friday, we do a little bit of that too. And then, of course, there's the macro and single stock video. But that's the weekend, and really that kind of sets me up for the week. As always, that watch list is a starting point for the week, because there's going to be a couple of names that I go through in this video that were not on the list that I thought was important. Then I also have here the best community of traders out there. I know them when people say that, but I really do believe it. I think, our community of traders, everybody is working together, right? We're not working against each other. We're all trying to help one another and crush the market together. So, and I'm very proud of that. So what did we have today? Well, things kind of got a little bit, from where we started in the day, everything started to kind of move up in the first hour of the day. Then we saw a little bit of back testing. And I think the levels that we talked about today, really kind of held, and the Qs were the big outperformer of the day. So you got the bounce that I think was somewhat possible for today. I didn't go, majorly long position Qs, but I just thought that it could definitely happen after what we had 2 weeks where the Qs underperformed. So even though there's a lot of names reporting this week, and you might see some chop further in the week, it just kind of set up for a little bit of a tradable bounce. So really, what I look at, and first of all, the Qs. Sorry, the S&P is the first chart that we've got up. There really isn't that much here. As I mentioned in Friday's video, you could overanalyze this if you want. Really, what helps me is the 1 hour levels. And we use the Market Webs indicator to kind of tell us where, basically a level to trade off of. And that level for the day was 32.1675, right? And if you go into the CF commentary, that's something that we kind of, that we talked about pretty in detail today. Where is my list from this morning? Yeah, and I said, let's see if we basically hold here. This was at 11:30, right? So again, we talked about this pre-market and said, hey, this is where we are pre-market. This level has to hold. We got there, and as soon as we get a big red bar, I think everybody starts to freak out a little bit because you don't know if that's going to hold. And then we're going to we had a bounce, and then we're kind of moving back to what we saw towards the end of the last week. But as you could see here, this was right at this bar, which again, different look by the time it closed, but it held value, and we had something to basically work off of. And it was the same thing in the Qs too. Very similar looking picture from the 1 hour. We went in here and we tested, again, same hour, right around 11 o'clock. Again, just a little of what I call shake and bake around that time. And you just kind of have to hold and watch, right? Because nobody knows, right? Nobody knows if we're actually going to break and, the day is going to be kind of, a little bit of a bounce and fade. But we didn't get that. But meantime, we had the levels to say, for me, I don't change anything unless it breaks one of my levels. And then you have to kind of reassess and make some changes, maybe buy a little bit of puts. But 257 was the level to watch. We held it, and like a champ, this thing held it and bounced further. So we're now basically moving through this value area. What we get for the rest of the week, I think, is going to be interesting. And for me, whenever I see one of these big weeks in front of us like this, I try just to be smart with my positioning. So regardless of what we see in terms of call activity and so forth, I've gone back and forth about that in various different videos about the call activity. It could give you some really good ideas and a sense of where the momentum is, but I don't hang my hat on making decisions, based on how much risk I'm going to carry, and all my decision based on there's call buying on the tape, right? I think that if you end up doing that, you're going to have a very difficult road in terms of what your P&L is going to be long term if you're making your decisions solely off of that, right? But that's my opinion. And that's something that I've learned over time, regardless of like how many people pump up, option activity. But it's a useful tool that we can use. There was a big block of BHC that went up midday, and then you hear somebody takes a stake in a name, right? So notice that, by the way, we went up to this version point of control and BHC. This is just news on somebody taking a stake. There's no actual fundamental news on the company, but somebody positioned on it. And if you bought some calls on this today, maybe you have a little bit of a profit. So, well played in something like that. By the way, as we go through this video, obviously everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. So Qs were the star performer. Interesting that IWM also did a little bit of bend but not break for the day. They actually flipped, and you'll see me tweet that out earlier in the day. I was like, wow, the IWM actually went from green to red. And here, same hour, this tested and held, and we managed to hold off the sellers basically for the day. So when we break down and when we look at particular sectors that did well, The home builders again, they were, besides the commodity plays like your silver miners, which were up 6.6% on the day, your gold miners, which were up 5.7% on the day. That's the junior gold miners, by the way. The regular GDX, the larger gold miners, were up 4.8%, but really, really strong. And I should have in here. This is not sorted, by the way, for the day change. This is sorted where the percentage open from the close. Again, I always like to see where the buyers and where the sellers are. And when I look at that, it kind of tells me. But the semiconductors, this should also be in dark green. We're also up nicely. We'll put GDX in here as well. But the home builders up 3% from the open, really strong. So this they opened up, up around, I guess, 88 basis points, and then rallied another 3%. So that's good for me. I got long last week. Even I was originally long the ITB ETF, which is all the home builders, and then what I did was I took profits in that one and moved towards KBH and PHM, which I was able to take profits in both of them. And then, it was nice to see the biotech come alive today, up 2.6%. Somebody did ask me about biotech this morning, and I said, oh, geez, I don't know. There is going to be some overhead resistance to it, but they came alive pretty well. So if I said that one incorrectly, my bad for that one, because they did have they were one of the best performers for the day. So nice strength in that group. Regeneron saw some nice calls today. That I thought was pretty interesting. That managed to get into value. Big day for that one, 4.7%. Not a name that we usually see a lot of call buying in, but we saw that one tagged a couple times for some big hefty calls. And if you see as well, look at all the names today that saw call activity today. And I feel like I left a couple out today too. So some of these names have earnings, like MLCO has earnings tomorrow. So when I see call activity and a name that reports earnings the next day, I kind of just ignore it personally, because over time I've known that it's basically a crapshoot when somebody buys calls the day before earnings. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We went over that example last week of Mattel, right? We heard about, there's Mattel weekly calls are going up. Well, they didn't work, except for more than, maybe you could scalp a little bit in the after hours. But it's a good example, right? And that's what I try to point out, is some good examples when some things work, some things don't, but you want to kind of learn from these things, in my opinion. Etsy saw a nice call buyer today. And this was a trade that I took for a day trade. I'm still hanging on to the last piece of it. But this was a name that we had talked about today, but pretty nice looking September 105 calls that went up. Chunky trade, $3.2 million. And this was a nice looking chart. I thought, and I think it just fits a theme. So I had taken, and this was a chart that I put on Twitter as well. I took targets up to the top of value. I don't know if this is going to break value for the week, because this is a 1 hour chart. So what do I do when that happens? I take profits, targets at where I see resistance. So that's me taking the last target, and I've got a little bit of a piece on, just to see if we can get through some of that short-term resistance. A few other things, I really try to concentrate when I see some rotation out there. I try to be pretty neutral in terms of charts. I posted a DuPont chart earlier in the day. I think this one has a chance. We also saw some call activity in CF Industries. So this is more your agriculture plays, right? We're certainly seeing this move in gold. I haven't talked about gold in this video, because I think everybody's at this point is talking about gold. But huge major breakout. We've gotten gold futures, one more VPOC to get to the upside. Silver, I thought we might rest a little bit here at this version point of control, and we have gone straight through it. So really impressive move in gold. I keep seeing all these notes. I don't know if they're just people trying to get page turning articles and so forth. What do you think this rally in gold means? Is it a negative for the market? Well, I don't know why people can't look at what's been going on in lumber right? So you have to look at the whole picture, right? So you can make that argument. Okay, well, maybe there's something weird going on in gold, and you could say, I guess you could ask people, do you think that's positive or negative for the market? But it's not just gold, guys. It's lumber. We know that copper hit some upside targets, so I think that's why copper is stalled. But do you think copper moving up is bad for the market? Or do you think copper moving up is bad for emerging markets? What about palladium? Do you think palladium is a sign of economic weakness, that palladium is rallying like crazy? So, my point is, I don't understand why people are isolating and saying, again, like I said, I think it's more about like people, putting eyes on their story or something like that. But I don't think this really is good market analysis when you just point out one commodity and say, oh, this could be bad for the market, because I don't think that platinum, palladium, lumber, right? I mean, lumber going up, you think that's because of this going on with lumber? Do you think that's because the economy is stalling? Because so you have to kind of look at these things and put the pieces of the puzzle together. You can't just take one piece of the puzzle and then make a decision and say, oh, this is what it is, right? There's more than one thing. And I think that traders on I don't want to say traders because some of them are not traders, but people on Twitter and financial media, sometimes they're only looking at one thing in isolation, and then they're trying to basically draw out a diagram because of that one piece of the puzzle. So I think it makes sense to put this in context. Clearly, what's happening as well is commodities do go up too when the dollar is weak. So we do have a pretty decent breakdown here in the dollar, and that's part of it. But I don't know if you could say there's one particular reason why gold, lumber, silver, copper, platinum, palladium, etc., etc. I would rather look to profit from these things. So that's why, for me, could it be that the agriculture commodities start to go next? Right? There is an ETF to watch, DBA. I started a little bit of position in that one today too. I think it's worth a shot. We went long a little bit of Bitcoin last week too, in the tactical portfolio. We made a change. This is nice. This was up 17% last week. Here's our tactical portfolio. Here's the changes that we made last week. Right. So, what I did was I decided to take out some tech. I was very heavy tech. So I took some profits and I took out Microsoft. I took out the Qs. I had the Qs in there as an overweight tech position. And what did I do? I put in, a little bit, some different things. I also reduced a little bit of Apple. Ahead of earnings. Again, still have Apple in the portfolio. Reduced a little bit of Shop because I'm up huge in that one, as well as Twilio, and added some things like the mid cap ETF, PPLT, which is Platinum, GBTC, and BlackRock. So pretty nice changes, I think, overall. Right, and here's what our new portfolio looks like. I'm happy to show this. It used to be in Motif. You could follow my portfolio as is, but we will probably make some more changes. There's probably a couple things that I want to move around in here. So usually I only rebalance it maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks. But being that we're in earnings season and seeing some rotations, I think there's some other things that are also looking attractive to me. So a few other trades. I mentioned this Pulte that we got long last week. I have my upside target. Final target I want to hit is up there around 46. The KBH, almost at my target there. I want to try to let this run a little bit more than that. And a few other trades that I looked at today. The crazy moves in the semiconductors. This Taiwan semiconductor is unbelievable. Up 12.6% after the move on Friday. I did position a little bit in Texas Instruments. I thought Texas Instruments. No, again, not seeing the same momentum there, but I think Texas Instruments, after a pretty good quarter, sometimes, again, like we talked about last week, these names are going to sell off a little bit on. They're going to sell off a little bit after earnings. I think that's just part of the process. We saw some veil call buying. Again, call buying. Everybody goes crazy. Oh, they bought calls on this one. It's got to get through some overhead resistance. So I actually like this chart. I don't care which one sees call activity in. So I went into BHP. This is also iron ore, nickel, a lot of similarities, but I think the chart looks better here, and I can target basically very close to 58. So I started a position in this one as well. So a lot of things to talk about today. I think it's going to be a very, very busy week. So, make sure that from my sense, what I try to do is not get overly greedy when we have a really nice day like this. Think of it as just one day. With the cues and so forth, I think a bounce was in the cards. Now the question is there follow through? And I think a lot of that is going to depend on, what happens with some of these names that report. Last one I'll talk about, PayPal. Nice looking. Now, there's a couple different things that we see in terms of option activity going into earnings. I don't really care too much when we see like weekly calls go up. But when somebody positions, I thought this was an interesting trade that went up. Which I'm a fan of PayPal. I do own PayPal on that tactical portfolio. But something like this, where somebody puts down like a little bit more than like, a small chip. This, I think they're putting down a bigger chip. And looks to me like a more savvy type positioning trade. Notice that they're not buying weeklies here, even though PayPal does report this week, right? They're buying the 180, 195 call spread. And then they're also financing that by selling some puts. So an interesting way to kind of think about an earnings trade. Whether they're right or wrong, I don't know, but it's a name that I like. It's a name that I think is consolidating in an uptrend. So we'll see. I will probably devise some type of earnings trade for PayPal, as well as I'll remain long in this in the tactical portfolio. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.